Humanity has had a long history of ever greater scientific, cultural, and technological achievements that border on the miraculous. With these in the pocket, we can look into the future confidently. Our path in this has been a long and amazing one, but it also seems that it has just begun. Against the amazing background of achieved superlatives, an equally amazing set of paradoxes comes to light that challenge us in the present time. One of these is the great modern paradox that the leading physicists don't believe in physics anymore. They have become dreamers of neutron stars, black holes in the sky, dark energy, and similar fairy tales that are not physically possible. How does one solve this amazing paradox of truth and fiction that cannot mingle except in fairy tales? Did we go wrong somewhere on the path of our cultural and scientific development? How is it possible that physicists don't believe in physics anymore and are honored by society for their wisdom? What is this trap? Why are we in it? How do we get out of it? Now that a new year lies before us, and possibly also a bright new age, the time has come to look back deep into history, where we came from, and from where we move forward to the present, in a comprehensive overview that touches on the traps encountered and the failures that inhibit us, and also on the achievements that we have brought along the way. This makes up a lengthy video that draws together a wide field. It is best seen in the larger context, because when seen in isolation, the significance of the individual aspects is diminished. The answer is explored in this 6-part exploration video with the title Peace and Joy and Power. The 6 parts cover a wide scene that spans all ages, from the cultural barrier of the last ice age to the challenge of the next one, and the human developments on our path to get there. If one traces the path of civilization back to its potential beginning, to the time when the chain of development appears to have started, that brought us link by link to where we are today, one invariably arrives at a barrier in distant time, beyond which everything blurs. This barrier may be termed the Ice Age barrier. The Ice Age barrier is a type of physical barrier that sharply limits human development, which it did for nearly 100,000 years. The barrier broke down 12,000 years ago, when the last ice age ended, and the interglacial period with its warm climate holiday began. The end of the last ice age was likely the inflection point when the great cultural development started that culminated in what we are today. Humanity had lived in a different world during the glaciation time, It lived in a largely cold world, consisting of both ice and deserts, with only a few habitable pockets that supported the entire world population of only a few million people, from whom we have all originated. No doubt some critical knowledge, some profound ideology, some gems of wisdom, and so forth, came forth from these pockets of Ice Age cultures. Their wisdom may have, in some degree, shaped our civilization. It stands to reason that the human presence was extremely small when the last ice age ended, because the harsh climate during the ice age had severely choked human expansion. The total world population is believed to have been in the range of 1 to 10 million people worldwide. Then, when the Ice Age ended, humanity had a free pass before it to develop itself. This development of humanity proved to be a slow process. Nothing much happened on this front until the stage was set for the development of science to begin in the 1600s. It took humanity more than 10,000 years to get to its second inflection point, to the dawn of science. From this point on, not even the sky was the limit to human achievements with increased power in living. Prior to that, human development was limited by primitive cultures, wars, slavery, looting and oppression. The first breakout from the primitive cultures started with the dawn of classical culture. Some traces of the ancient thinking appears to have been carried forward into modern time, from the few areas where human living had been possible during the Ice Age, such as in the regions near the equator where the rainfall is the strongest, such as around Malaysia and Indonesia, and in few places near major rivers like the Amazon, Congo, Nile and Indus rivers. In an Ice Age world, rain is scarce. Ice core samples from the last Ice Age revealed that the volume of precipitation had been 80% lower than today. This means that much of the world, where the world had been ice-free, had been desert, except in those few places like around Malaysia, India, the Upper Nile and the Amazon and Congo, where strong rainfalls might have occurred. In the areas outside the tropics and subtropics, almost no places would have been inhabitable because of the cold, snow and ice. The earliest post-Ice Age cultures would likely have developed in a few pockets within these regions. The early Chinese culture may have developed from the eastern part of this background, including Indonesia, the Mekong River, and possibly the Pearl River. The most successful offspring of the deep historic cultures appears to be the Chinese culture and the Egyptian culture. In the most recent millennia, the Chinese cultures became characterized by the high-level thinking of the philosopher Confucius, who had lived in the 500 BC time frame. One of his gems of wisdom is the Golden Rule, to do unto others as one would have them do unto oneself. However, between those late times in civilization and the end of the last ice age, more than 10,000 years lay in between, like a grey blanket. Of these grey times, little to almost nothing is known. The earliest organized civilization takes us back in time to almost 7,000 BC. It emerged along the Indus River, with its own language and unique culture, of which only some ruins remain, with inscriptions of a language that has become lost. In later time, the Mesopotamian civilization started to develop in the 4000 BC time frame. And still later, the early Egyptian dynasties began to develop in roughly the 3000 BC time frame. What links these cultures backwards to the end of the Ice Age is unknown. Apparently, however, they linked forward in time with each other by trade, which also included trading ideas. The turning point from the Great times appears to be in roughly the 1300 BC time frame. The breakout is marked by intellectual pioneers like Hammurabi in Babylon, and later by Homer, the Greek poet, and by Solon, the Athenian lawmaker and political reformer, who was a near contemporary with Confucius. All of these pioneers were aiming to uplift civilization from different backgrounds. Slightly later, the great Greek philosophers Socrates and Plato emerged on the scene, representing still higher ideals and perceptions. Christ Jesus, the master of Christianity, appears to have emerged from all of that. He emerged a few hundred years after Plato. It has been suggested by researchers that the Christian ideology is a composite of the best of the cultures of Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and also India. The inflection point towards modern culture appears to be the attempt by Socrates and Plato to resurrect the fading Greek classical culture after the long Peloponnesian War that had ravished the nation. However, in the process of resurrecting the Greek classical culture, Plato encountered a poison pill named Aristotle that poisoned the future. Aristotle was painted by Raphael as the enemy of the Academy in his fresco The School of Athens. Plato represented at once scientific awareness, aiming to lift humanity up. Aristotle represented the opposite, smallness and slavery, aiming to keep humanity down, lest an uplifted, self-aware humanity would overthrow the private wealth and slavery system. Raphael painted Plato with his bare feet on the ground. In contrast, he painted Aristotle's feet bound in golden sandals. Plato is shown pointing upwards, with the Book of Wisdom under his arm. Aristotle is shown in a gesture of keeping society down, while he flaunts the books of wisdom. He represents the opposite of Plato. He represents a lie. He represents deception. Raphael painted both men entering the school of Athens together, side by side, both shaping the culture of humanity. Plato is regarded by many as the precursor of Christianity, while Aristotle is honored as the precursor of the world empire ideology, with Rome becoming the first champion. To the present day, the empire nobility is referred to as the aristocracy. It is here, at the culmination of cultural developments, where Christianity emerged as such a significant element in the advance of civilization, that history itself is now measured against it, and where the train of counter-ideologies was put on track prominently. To counter the dawn of Christianity, the counter-revolution started a long chain of cultural warfare efforts that continues to be directed against advanced ideas and revolutionary recognitions. The authorities of Rome had wielded great might at that time. However, they found themselves impotent to deal with the idea of freedom that Christ Jesus had raised up, who had raised humanity up to being the Son of God, the pinnacle of life and dignity and creativity. Rome evidently realized that it had no power against this revolution in thinking, not even to maintain itself in the face of it. Consequently, Rome started a war of persecution to squash it, which became a deep-reaching cultural war. Since the murdering of people in public orgies could not squash the revolutionary ideas of freedom and human dignity, Rome chose eventually the Aristotelian way and took Christianity over and turned it upside down. With the writing of the Gospels by the Roman Church, 2 centuries after their fact, the dawn of Christianity became fictionalized. No supporting documents exist for the Gospels that were written. Since the writers of the Gospels gave themselves the freedom to write history in support of the Empire Church, the model of the Aristotelian counter-ideology was quietly inserted into the New Testament created by the Church of Rome. It was inserted in the form of a devil mythology, a type of counter-deity standing side by side with God, but in opposition. The term devil and Satan appear more than 100 times in the New Testament, compared to only 13 times for the term Satan in the Old Testament, and most of that in a single book, the book of Job, that may have been a Asiatic script. The term devil doesn't appear in the Old Testament at all. The Satan and devil worship by fear appears to have been quietly inserted into Christianity as a counter-spiritual and counter-cultural element. It would be surprising if this counterculture method had not been applied and had not been kept alive in numerous ways all the way to modern time, where it became applied even to science. Nevertheless, the truth keeps shining through in both fronts. A major modern type of cultural warfare process that has infected much of the world had been quietly started in 1950 in Berlin in defense of the ruling post-war empire. This particular modern cultural warfare machine was organized and funded by the American CIA. The focus had been to control the mind of post-war Europe and the world at large, evidently along the line of the old Roman model. The organization had been set up for this purpose and had been named Congress for Cultural Freedom. The organization had operated in Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, Latin America, and Australia. Officially, its purpose was stated to counter communism. Unofficially, the purpose was to counter culture itself. Cultural freedom means freedom from culture, since culture is freedom. While the False Front operation became known in 1966, the organization was shut down as a CIA operation. It became reorganized, however, in 1967 as a private organization. It was named the International Association for Cultural Freedom, which continued on with funding from the Ford Foundation. It stands to reason that this huge effort, which established a broad front against culture, would also spill over into science, in the form of a war against science itself, since science is a leading component of culture. Science is supporting the power of humanity to achieve ever greater freedoms in meeting its needs. It may have been here where the paradox began, that physicists no longer believe in physics. As if a switch was flicked, the existence of plasma in cosmic space was no longer considered, or allowed to be considered, as if it had never existed in reality and in the domain of science. A facet of reality was suddenly turned off by a silent philosophical ruling. The decades of work by plasma pioneers such as Christian Berglund and Hallis Alvin was effectively pushed out of sight as irrelevant. The entire subject of cosmic plasma physics became taboo. When phenomena were observed that are clearly plasma flow phenomena, the observed phenomena became twisted and presented as mechanistic phenomena, regardless of the fact that the twisted, imagined phenomena are not physically possible, such as neutron stars, black holes, gravity waves, and even the hydrogen fusion sun. The imposition of mechanistic theories to replace plasma dynamics is akin to removing one of the basic colors from the palette of an artist, such as banning the use of red or yellow. Rome had been far less successful in removing the spirit of Christianity from the cultural landscape, as some of it keeps shining through the veil, with much yet to be discovered. while much of the original Christ-ideology became overlaid by Rome with politics, religiosity, and centuries of bitter persecution. Some core elements had evidently remained. Some core concepts actually found their way into the Gospels. It is possible thereby to peel away the veil that was cast over the great spiritual awakening that had occurred in an attempt to hide it. By peeling away the layers of political fiction, it becomes possible to glean a faint sense of what might have been and will yet be. On this path, beyond religiosity, some core concepts come to light in which one may find an answer to the puzzling paradox of our time, such as why leading-edge physicists in the world don't believe in physics anymore, and why they are honored for their achievements. Since the physicist's paradox didn't exist in Roman times, one needs to rephrase the paradox into something more fundamental. For this purpose, let's do some role-playing. In acknowledging that Christ Jesus is the man against whose birth the flow of historic time is being referenced, the man who dared to challenge Rome and raise humanity above it, let us assign the role of the King of Science to him, to Christ Jesus, in our role-playing. Let us give him the role to represent the most scientific concepts that have been achieved to date. Jesus' historic achievements seem to suggest that he was a scientific man, perhaps the greatest of his time, if not of all time. And since the historic woman, Mary Magdalene, appears to have been mentally close to Christ Jesus, let's give her the role to represent the most advanced thinking in modern society. Let's stage a dialogue between the two to bridge the gap between history and the present with advanced science. Imagine that the modern Mary Magdalene did have the chance to ask Christ Jesus of old, "What do I want most in my life?" This is a question that is still on the horizon, something that most people can relate to in some form. In the role-playing, the modern Mary Magdalene might say to Jesus, "If you had asked me that question, what I want most in my life, I wouldn't have known how to answer. So I'm turning the scene around by asking you, the pioneer of science, this question. So, Master, what must the answer be? What is it that I should want most in my life?" The answer is simple. Jesus would reply, "What you want most is the same that the whole world wants and is far from experiencing. This is peace, joy, and power. But don't look for them in religion and superficial philosophy. Find them in yourself." And why is this so? It is so because these three are a unit that is essentially one. When people seek a part of the whole in isolation, they run into problems. Nothing works. The reason why nothing works is that what they seek is not possible in isolation. And this is so because the three parts are a trinity. They exist as a package. They function as a package, or they don't function at all. The package is simple. Peace unfolds into joy, and joy into power, and power, your power for good, reflects itself back into peace. The power of humanity also reflects itself back into joy. The reason why this trinity forms a triangle is that every point in the triangle is linked with every other point. Thereby, the whole functions as a unit that is threefold, that is a trinity. A trinity is like a tripod. A tripod stands secure on any terrain when its three legs are deployed. If any one leg is missing, the tripod cannot stand at all. That's the nature of a functional trinity. If society would deploy peace as a package that includes the development of joy and the power of its humanity, its civilization would stand secure. This is also so in the individual context. That's why I use the term Trinity. I use this term to make a point, because the concept is mostly applied incorrectly, especially in religion, where the incorrect concept has tragic consequences. In the theological context, the term Trinity is often applied to three isolated elements that function as separate parts. Thereby, none is really understood. In this incorrect application, the elements, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, are operated, each one standing by itself. Each element is deemed to represent God separately. It gives God three different names. That's confusing. This isolating trinity also turns God into an abstraction. The abstraction is understood as totally isolated from humanity. Humanity becomes irrelevant. The concept of God as an abstraction supports nothing. And as you may have noticed, Mary, humanity is completely left out of the picture. It doesn't appear as if it isn't significant. It is rendered irrelevant. That's significant to your question, Mary, and not only to your question. In contrast, peace, joy, and power have a practical object to support. The object is you. The object is humanity. The effect is civilization. Peace, joy, and power have no meaning except to you who can experience their essence, who is liberated by them. This includes humanity. This Trinity and you are united by its uplifting effects. This Trinity with its effects surrounds you, and it shields you from yielding to its opposite, fear, despondency, helplessness. Peace and joy and power take these away from you. Peace takes fear from the heart. Joy dissolves despondency. Power obsoletes helplessness. Peace, joy, and power flow with healing in its wings. The theological Trinity, in comparison, doesn't function as a Trinity at all, but functions as a three-part vertical hierarchical structure. It doesn't even pretend to function as a Trinity, but functions as an overlord structure, with humanity implied as the underling. The theological Trinity puts God into the infinite sky, and humanity, by omission, into the dust of the earth, having no value at all. The theological Trinity places a singular Son beside the Father as an incarnation of a singularity termed God, and in between the two singularities, the theological Trinity creates a third singularity that it terms the Holy Spirit, which humanity does not have, but must, presumably, look up to from the torments of its needs in order to get a glimpse of what it is not, praying for mercy and redemption. This time of Trinity makes no sense, Mary. It robs society of its humanity. It isolates everything. Your need, Mary, is to get away from this terrible distortion of reality. This is also the reason why physicists don't believe in physics anymore. When the world of physics is isolated into unrelated singularities, the stage is set to venture into fantasies where one drifts away from reality. Your need is to rediscover yourself. You need to rediscover your humanity, your peace and your joy and your power, none standing in isolation. This is everyone's need, even in physics. Universal isolation has become pandemic. It started in ancient times. It spread into everything. The theological Trinity concept isolates what is inherently one. It isolates it into an overlord to underling relationship that relegates humanity into the box of impotence. Everyone should want to get out of this box of impotence. This model has ruled the Dark Ages. It still rules society to a large degree. Humanity dances to the tune of imagined impotence. This is reflected in the increasing scientific impotence to acknowledge what is real in physics. Is it any wonder, then, that humanity has built nuclear bombs? It has built them because it sees itself as impotent to deal with one another as human beings. And also it has built not just one, but tens of thousands. The nuclear terror has imprisoned humanity into the box by fear. Humanity squirms in this box. But this is not what defines humanity. Humanity should wake up and cry out of shame. We yield weapons out of fear, impelled by our perceived impotence to live side by side as human beings, laterally, as a common universal humanity. There is no joy in this box of impotence loaded with fear, much less is there any peace in it. This self-terrorizing state is the result of humanity being imprisoned for millennia into a terrible theology of universal isolation that society has allowed to come upon it. Everything that is in this box of humanity's self-imprisonment, which it has lived in for so long, is so shameful that society is inclined to hide it out of sight in a closet, if it could, so as not to be reminded of it. Except this only increases the tragedy. In this trap, humanity cannot recognize itself and thereby finds it difficult, if not impossible, to pry itself out of the box. That's why humanity builds ever bigger weapons. Only someone who is alert of the trap is qualified to shine some light into this prison box. And this, Mary, is what defines your need and your duty to yourself. This is a critical need for you, Mary, because your very existence is endangered by the darkness in that box. This darkness is a danger for the whole of humanity, because its physicists have become so impotent as human beings that they don't even believe in physics anymore. This is dangerous, Mary. Some light is needed here. Let me draw out for you what it means to shine some light into the dark box of illusions. Let me illustrate what I perceive as the real Trinity. Jesus might continue. The real Trinity begins with God as being all. At the center of this universal all, I see humanity located. Humanity needs to be there. It is the pinnacle of life with a near-infinite range of creativity. This divinely centered humanity unfolds at the very core of the Great One that is God, which renders God and man as one in being. The two is one whole, in the sense as principle and its idea is one. This unique geometry renders humanity the sons of God, in the sense in which a calendar month is sometimes referred to as the son of a year. I drew a circle around the whole, not as a circumference, but to locate the center. In reality, there is no being outside possible, because the one is all. Nor is the concept of a center actually possible either in the larger context, where the one is all. The concept of a center in the universal all expands into a lateral lattice without boundary, with every individual part of the one existing laterally, side by side, like the tiles of a kitchen floor. So, Mary, see yourself as one of the tiles, and see yourself as bound to every other by strands of many colors, which are the spiritual colors of our common humanity, such as love, truth, life, soul, mind, principle, and spirit. And so, the strands of color that illumine the lattice and link it into one are also the colors of God, so to speak. This tells me that every human being has a mind that can behold the truth, so that the phenomenon of a physicist not believing in physics anymore is not possible in principle. Nor is it possible for you, Mary, not to experience peace, joy, and power. While you cannot measure these spiritual colors and weigh them, it is plain to see that they are immensely substantial, because if even a single one of these colors was missing, civilization would collapse, or would not exist in the first place. So they do exist. The basic trinity that defines the nature of the universal all is recognized in my sense of science as the unity of God, man, and light. This principle is holy in the sense that it is perfect. In the nature of this basic trinity, I can recognize secondary trinities existing, dynamically, operating. Nothing happens randomly in the universe. When principle rules, there is an intention standing behind it. In the larger context, the intention is for the universe to be. For example, the physical force of gravity evidently exists by intention, because without it, the universe would not exist. For this reason, the force of gravity exists. Good is an intention likewise. Of course, good does not exist in isolation. Good comes to light in intelligent recognition. The recognition is progressive. It progresses into science. Science is expressed in progression. Since this basic secondary trinity is spiritual in nature, we need to see it also in terms of specific spiritual concepts that we can work with to understand the colors that unite us. Nor can this secondary trinity be without concrete manifestations. The secondary manifest brings us back to peace, joy, and power. You described the theological trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost as a vertical and thereby a hierarchical structure. Mary might say, this doctrine places humanity at the bottom of the hierarchical heap and defines it as of no significance, a kind of underling. This is still happening to the present day. What hope does humanity have under this terrible doctrine of isolation and near infinite degradation? I see no hope there. The doctrine renders us powerless. I am not surprised, therefore, that humanity has filled its powder cakes to the brim with nuclear war preparations, while it has blinded its eyes to the massive evidence before it that the near Ice Age transition will occur in 30 years, by which the entire planet will become uninhabitable for humanity, unless humanity builds itself the needed technological infrastructures for it. For 70 years, humanity has been evading this problem and has been adding ever more to the powder cake for nuclear war. With it, humanity assures its self-annihilation. I see this as the mark of a humanity that lives like slaves under an oligarchic system of overlords that dictates its thinking and actions. I see the same in the blinding of society to the Ice Age challenge. This is done with intentional distortion of humanity's science. The masters of the oligarchic system are proud to have achieved this devastating control over society. They own its very soul. It took them less than a century to achieve this near-complete subjugation, but they have succeeded. They have established themselves as the empire of the world, not by force, but by quiet, gradual subjugation. Every single nation in the world is now living subjected to this control. America, China, Russia, Germany, France, Israel, England, even little North Korea, all hail the terror weapon that has been built for no other purpose than the mass destruction of humanity, including their own destruction. None of these nations own themselves anymore. Likewise, every single nation on the planet bows with its face to the dust before the perversion of science that hides the Ice Age dynamics. To date, not a single nation on the planet has broken itself free from this trap of the world empire, living as slaves to it. I'm not surprised at this, because this is precisely what the theological Trinity has projected for almost 2 millennia in various forms. This trap has rendered humanity as having no more significance than the dust of the ground, or as impotent slaves, whose souls are deemed to be purified by the suffering they are able to endure. Humanity celebrates the Roman cross. It celebrates its impotence. Christianity has lived under the signet of suffering and impotence from the day in which Christianity was invented, with the signet of empire imposed from the highest levels of its theology. The theology of oligarchy is that if the very Son of God is ordained to suffer and die, then so is humanity. By its inherent impotence, humanity is doomed to the same fate. Under this theology of oligarchy, it becomes a divine service for humanity to subject itself to a course to oblivion. The theology of the political Trinity states that the Son of God took upon himself all the suffering in the world. It states that he suffered for us as an exemplar. What a trap! What a trip! That's deposit thought control to the extreme. How do we even begin to free ourselves from that? Mary might conclude. The ideology of empire and the ideology of the religions is functionally the same. This is so because the vertical theology of Christianity is a copy of the Roman model and of every model of empire before it, including that of the religious empires. The master of science might say. The system of empire was all that was known at the time, Mary. It was practiced by the priesthood in almost all religions. Every theology that existed had put some type of God at the center and humanity at the circumference that is impelled to serve that imagined God. The ruling empires used the same theology and still do. In this case, the oligarchy has placed itself at the center, and society is impelled to serve it. In later time, the masters of empire laid an egg and invented communism. In communism, the state is God, and is placed at the center. In this case, society is impelled to serve the state. My model is radically different. Divine science places humanity at the center, at the very center of the heart of the universal one that is God. This is the only model that is fundamentally different. In the case of the theological model, three structures have been applied that assure that society serves its God. The model functions to enslave humanity to an oligarchy that claims to be God. In that case, the empire model, the oligarchy, established its civil and legal structures and also illegal structures to assure that society serves it. This model functions to enslave humanity to an oligarchy by all means possible, including the means of money, property, elitism, and if need be, force. The model for communism employs more noble structures to assure that humanity will serve its God, which in this case is the state. But this system cannot work either in a productive manner, because humanity is an auxiliary to it, instead of being the center. No matter how noble the goals may be, when the principle is wrong, nothing productive results. This system is a paradox in essence, because it impels society into slavery to itself. Only the scientifically correct model serves humanity. It is powered by the freedom of our common humanity. It functions. It is the only system that functions productively. All the other systems are inherently counter-civilization by design, some more so than others. The boundaries between these models blur, of course. Most of the models that rule today in various parts of the world are mixtures of all four models, especially in terms of the applied supporting structures. Some versions, of course, are outright dangerous, even immensely consequential when dangerous structures are implemented. The most dangerous system, of course, is the system of empire and the structures that this system became known for. One of the dangerous supporting structures of the system of empire is deception, war, and terror. These dangerous structures are located where, in my model, science is located. The imperial weapon of deception becomes most dangerous when the target is science, when the object is to turn science upside down or to disable it. Here is where the Congress for Cultural Freedom comes into play, that was set up to degrade culture, which simply means freedom from culture, or in the case of science, that is one of the pinnacles of human culture, the degradation means freedom from science. Under this umbrella, it becomes possible to create an environment in which physicists can be inspired not to believe in physics anymore. This engineered failure in society has become epidemic in modern time, so much so that the very existence of humanity is now endangered by this epidemic that has deception implanted at its root. Mary might say, deception is a despotic trick that was once championed by the Delphic oracles that the Roman rulers had routinely solicited advice from. The oracles lied for financial gain and shaped the world accordingly into the hell it became under Rome. They shifted the world into a path of hell that nearly destroyed civilization. They turned the Roman Empire into a fool. They gave it an empty ideology with which the system of empire destroyed itself. Are we still on this course? It seems that we are. You suggest that the world is still in grave danger because of the consequences of the deceptions. Some factions have become liars for profits indeed. In lies we trust is the modern motto now. We almost print it on the dollar bill. Is that what came out of the perverted Trinity? Jesus would laugh. If you see the Trinity that way, you are thinking too small, and you are trapped by it. The Trinity that I behold is the very opposite. I see it as beautiful, profound, and so big that it encompasses all. It is all-inclusive, but not in terms of singularities. It separates nothing, it creates nothing, it draws together in perception what is actually real. It puts humanity at the center as the tallest manifestation of God. It gives humanity a sense of what God is by defining humanity as the sons of God, in the sense that a calendar month is perceived as the son of a year. It draws up an image of a God that is all, and humanity as the sons of God, seen as a part of the unit of one that includes all. It defines God for us with the highest ideals that we cherish in the heart, that we sometimes even allow us to experience. No slaves exist here, no suffering, no underlings, no overlords, no impotence, no lies, no liars. All humanity exists with God, individually on the same level, side by side, as in the lateral lattice where all is linked with strands of light, where humanity has universally all that God is. And that's huge and profound. This means that it is not possible for physicists not to believe in physics anymore, and society likewise, because the mind of humanity is not unaware of the truth. This unawareness is a delusion in the landscape of dreaming. Reality is not an abstraction without expression. People call reality God. In it we discover the absolute of ourselves. Omnipotence is one of the attributes that we attribute to God. The attribute of omnipotence replaces the imagined impotence that we cling to in dreaming. Omnipotence is one of the names for humanity, just as the name Christ has been attached to humanity. So don't talk to me about impotence, Mary, or even imagine it. Don't talk to me about humanity's impotence in emptying the powder keg of the nuclear weapons crap, with the excuse that an oligarchy won't let you do this. Impotence is crap. It is self-delusion. The real contest is omnipotence versus nothing. No oligarchy rules in the lateral lattice where God is all and good is the only power. The Ice Age challenge isn't anyway different than the nuclear weapons challenge. If you think it is not humanly possible to create a new world for humanity's living in 30 years, and with such a power that the Ice Age cannot touch it, then you have blocked yourself off into a black hole of self-delusion. Jesus might add, I see no valid reason why humanity should not be engaged already in building itself 6,000 new cities with new agriculture and new industries afloat on the equatorial seas. People cry from their black hole mentality that this cannot be accomplished. They cry out from their hole of delusion. The real face of humanity is omnipotence. Why shouldn't humanity build itself the critical infrastructures on which its future existence depends? The materials to do this exist in abundance, and so do the energy resources, even the technologies exist. All that humanity needs to do is to step out of the black hole mentality. When this step is taken, the impossible will be accomplished with ease and with joy, and will lay down peace like a carpet that flows from experiencing the great creative power that humanity has, that produces great and incredible good. You evidently realize that there is no such thing as an astrophysical black hole existing in the real universe, Mary might comment. The imagined cause for this type of phenomena is not physically possible, isn't it? No one cannot be aware of this fact, except in dreaming where nothing is real. People believe in fantasy objects in their dreaming. The pioneer of science would say, the supermassive black hole that supposedly distorts the universe with gravitational effects, which is deemed to be forged by a neutron star, is a fantasy object. It is real to those trapped in the fantasies. In dreaming, anything can be fantasized. The supermassive neutron stars that people dream about aren't physically possible because neutrons cannot exist in isolation from an atomic nucleus in which they are formed. This is simple, basic physics. When two protons are forced to join contrary to the electric force that repels them from each other, the overpowering energy is preserved in the bond of the resulting package. The energy is preserved in the package. Within the protons themselves, an internal change is caused in the process of the physical joining. With the protons not being solid entities, but are formed by a combination of energy fields, named quarks, the joining of the two protons causes a transmutation of one of the energy fields, which alters the electric characteristic of one of the protons. There are three types of energy fields combined in the proton. Two types are quarks, termed up quarks and down quarks. The third type is an energy field that creates the effect of mass, termed the Higgs field, according to the name who had theorized its existence. By joining the two protons, one of the up quarks in the resulting package becomes transmuted into a down quark. This renders the respective proton a neutron. A neutron is an electrically neutral combination of quarks. The electric potential still remains residing in the quarks, only their expressed effects are cancelled out. An up quark has a field of 2/3 positive energy, and a down quark has a field of 1/3 negative. The two up quarks and one down quark in a proton end up to an effective electric field of +1. If one of the up quarks is transmuted into a down quark, then the sum adds up to 0, and the respective proton becomes a neutron. The energy for the transmutation is likely transferred from the mass field. When the resulting package is forced apart, which can happen in numerous ways, the binding energy that has created the package is released, and the thereby isolated neutron decays back into being a proton in a nuclear decay process. While radioactive decay times with some atomic nucleons may range from seconds to thousands of years, the decay time of isolated neutrons tend to be significantly shorter, too short for the neutrons from an exploding object to gravitationally condense again into forming a neutron star. Isolated neutrons simply cannot exist long enough. Neutrons can only exist in stable form, and do so for billions of years, as a part of the package in which they are formed. Neutron stars therefore cannot exist, no matter how strongly physicists believe otherwise. The neutron star is a dream object, never a real object. Most of the physicists in the world believe in their dream objects, as the alternative is artificially blocked. If Aristotle would behold the science landscape of today, he would surely say to Plato, "Didn't I tell you that amazing results can be achieved with the appropriate forms of deception? Didn't I tell you that the perception of people can be pushed deep into fairy tale land, that the very elite can be made to believe that black is white and white is black, and this so strongly that they will resist any effort by anyone to convince them otherwise. This is the effect that can be achieved when science is politically diluted with deceptions. All that was needed in this case was the removal of plasma physics from astrophysics. In the real world, stable isolated neutrons do not exist anywhere except in the imagination. All isolated neutrons that typically result from the numerous forms of nuclear fission rapidly decay back into becoming protons. This happens in every case, or else the Earth would have been clogged up with them by the nuclear decay that has been going on within the Earth for eons. The Earth would thereby have become a neutron star. Obviously, it didn't. All isolated neutrons become protons. As protons, they disperse with the electric force as protons do. Neutron stars are simply not possible, nor are the processes possible that supposedly create the neutron stars. Neutron stars are believed to be the residue of exploding stars. The exploding star phenomena is not possible either, because a sun, which every star is, cannot explode. Every sun in the universe is a sphere of plasma instead of atomic gas, as it is imagined to be. Plasma cannot explode. This means that stars cannot explode either. The observed supernova events are not the result of exploding stars. They are only possible as nuclear explosions of planets. Only atomic material can explode. The explosions may be triggered by various types of causes. When atomic explosions happen, the binding energy that has formed the atomic structures when the atoms were forged becomes unbound. In an atomic bomb explosion, only a few grams of the bomb's atomic material actually fissions. When an entire planet fissions, the result is unimaginably enormous. That's what a supernova is. Such events happen rarely, once in a decade in our galaxy of 400 billion stars, or in nearby galaxies. But when it happens, the event is big. Supernova events can be so big that they can be observed in nearby galaxies. Most of the resulting fission products typically remain atomic in nature. No neutron star results. The planet blows apart with little but dust remaining of it. The dust typically forms a nebula. Planets tend to explode near a hyperactive star. All the atomic material in the universe is synthesized in plasma fusion on the surface of the Sun. The material disperses with the solar wind and forms planets. In extreme cases, the synthesized material itself may expand and become a nebula of sorts. The materials also condense into planets. A planet may become severely overloaded in time. The gravitational pressure may reach a point when it crushes the atoms within the planet's core, by which the atom's binding energy becomes unbound and the entire planet fissions in a chain reaction explosion. The unbound neutrons decay back into becoming protons again, from which they were formed in the first place. No neutron resident remains that becomes a black star. If a stellar explosion would destroy all atoms so that a neutron star would remain, the resulting nebula would never be seen, because wherever light is emitted, atomic material is involved. Neutron stars simply do not exist, nor do the physics exist for them to be created. Planetary explosions may also result from collisions with a sun. Most collisions are by micrometeorites. The gigantic-sized type of supernova collisions are rare. In no case, however, would a neutron star be born in the residue from the explosion. Supermassive neutron stars are simply fantasy objects. And even if they were real, they wouldn't have more than half the mass of their original planet. The resulting gravitational effect would be minuscule, instead of being supergigantic. The entire neutron star imagery is simply a dream, and is physically impossible. The attributed effects are simply plasma effects in every case. Even the famous pulsars that are often found in nebulas are much more rationally understood in plasma physics. In the fantasy world, pulsars are deemed to be fast-spinning neutron stars, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, which are deemed to generate the energy pulses as they rotate. In the plasma cosmos, such fantasies are not needed. The pulsars are much simpler. At node points in plasma streams, plasma becomes magnetically concentrated under a magnetic confinement dome. When the plasma pressure exceeds the confinement strength, a stream of plasma is ejected at the weakest point of the confinement dome. As the pressure is reduced thereby, the confinement is re-established and the pressure builds up again, and so the process repeats itself endlessly. No impossible magic is needed for pulsars to exist. The latest fairy tale magic imagines a mystical cosmic dance of two binary black hole stars orbiting around a gravitational center. They are deemed to be distorting space with their gravity as they go. They are also deemed to be orbiting with ever greater rapidity, becoming drawn ever closer towards each other. The entire process lasts only a fraction of a second till they merge, after which a whirl of gravitational effects results that are felt over billions of light years. The effects have been termed gravitational waves. The fantastic whirlwind dance, of course, is impossible because everyone knows the most basic principle of orbital mechanics renders such an occurrence absolutely impossible. The fact is demonstrated by every orbiting planet in every solar system throughout the universe. Their orbits are stable. Even binary star systems, of which there are many, remain stable in their orbit, not just for seconds, but for billions of years. Stable orbits are achieved in every case by the basic fact that the centrifugal force would increase a magnitude greater than the gravitational hold would increase should an orbit decay. For this reason, orbits cannot decay, and of course do not decay. The entire fairy tale dance of the imagined black holes, all mathematically theorized with great precision, becomes thereby physically impossible. The much promoted theory of this imagined dance demonstrates nothing more than that in their dreaming, physicists don't even believe in the most basic mechanistic principles anymore that have been understood since the 1600s, when Johannes Kepler discovered the principles, and for which the universe itself is proof, and infinitely so. This appears to be not the worst of it yet, Mary interrupts the master scientist. The fairy tales that are spun around the sun are worse. The fairy tales proclaim that black is white and white is black. But what do I see when I look through the umbra of the sunspots? I see that the sun is dark beneath the shiny surface, instead of it being brighter, as it should be, being powered from the inside. We are told by the physicists in their fantastic tale about the sun that the sunspots are dark because of dark energy streaming through them. We are told that dark is light and that black is white. They sing this song as required by the script given to them. What would a fairy tale be without a large dose of magic spicing up the imagined wonders? The master of science would answer. A child may come along as in Andersen's fairy tale of the emperor's new clothes. The child may say, "Look, there is nothing there. The holes are empty, big or small. I see dark spots on the sun that I shouldn't see. That's how it is. The fairy tale is wrong. Black is black, and white is white, and never the twain shall be reversed." And the child would be correct in saying this, because the real sun truly is dark inside. All the light and energy that flows from it flows from the surface. When there's a hole torn into the surface, the darkness beneath it becomes visible. This has to be so, because the sun, being a plasma star, is inherently empty inside. Nothing happens inside the sun. The energetic reactions happen on the surface. A child can understand this. It is that simple. The sunspots are a part of the proof that we live under a sun that is a plasma star. Also, the sun is far too light to be a gas sphere, compared with the big gas planets. Jupiter was twice the volume of Saturn, has twice the mass density because of its greater gravitational gas compression. But the Sun, with 1,000 times greater volume than Jupiter, has roughly the same mass density as Jupiter. its mass density should be 1,000 times greater, but it isn't. This means that the Sun cannot be a gas sphere. In fact, a gas sphere of the size of the Sun could not exist. The gravitational compression in its core would be so great that all its atoms would be crushed if it was a gas sphere. None of these paradoxes, of course, are encountered in plasma physics. Plasma is a soup of electrically charged particles. It is made up of protons that repel each other by their positive electric force. Plasma also contains negative electrons that are 2,000 times lighter. They squirm around the protons and shield the protons from each other. When plasma exists in very large masses, the lighter atoms tend to migrate to the surface, away from the gravitational center, like marshmallows float on top of milk. This enables the protons inside the Sun to repel each other more. By this principle, a Sun is essentially a hollow shell that has its greatest mass density on its surface, with the surface teeming with electrons. That is where the reactions take place. The plasma shell principle for a Sun is also the reason why extremely large stars are able to exist. The giant star Ubi Scuti, for example, is 5 billion times larger in volume than our Sun, but it is believed to contain only a 10-fold greater mass than the Sun. With this comparatively tiny mass, the giant star outshines our Sun 340,000-fold. These extraordinary features are totally impossible under the gas compression model for a Sun. But they are not surprising for a plasma Sun that is energized by interstellar streams of plasma flowing into it. That's what powers our Sun too, and every other Sun. Every Sun reacts with interstellar plasma that is densely focused onto it. Plasma itself is invisible. Plasma lacks the dynamics that generates light and heat. Only atomic elements emit light, and only when they are affected by energetic plasma. Both processes occur on the surface of the Sun. The Sun produces atomic elements and energizes them in the same process. The sunlight is our witness that this is so. It tells us that the Sun is a plasma star. The sunlight combines the emission spectra of all the natural elements, because they all exist on the surface of the Sun, where they are created. I think I'm beginning to understand your concept of the Trinity, Mary might interject. If one regards the plasma Sun as the Father, the Holy Ghost as the sunlight, and us as the sons who live in the sunlight, then the theological Trinity actually works. In the sunlight we discover what the Sun is, just as we discover in the 7 spiritual colors, life, truth, love, mind, principle, spirit and soul, what God is, and what we are, as we value all of these colors in all that we are. If a single color was missing, we wouldn't have a civilization. We might not even exist. This means that we see in us God reflected in all that we are. Except the sunlight contains not just 7 colors. It contains the colors of 94 different spectra mixed together. Maybe this correlative trinity was already understood in ancient times, in some degree, and then became lost by the use of archaic terms and concepts that had reduced the spiritual universe to mechanistic phenomena, as we see it again happening in physics. The ancients also lacked the science and technologies that we have today. The master of science might answer. They couldn't have seen the sun other than a glare. The face of the sun as we see it now is not homogeneous, but is granular. The surface of the sun is a sea of reaction cells in which plasma is combined into atomic elements. The light that the sun emits flows from the atoms forged in these reaction cells. All the atoms that naturally exist are synthesized there on the surface of the sun. Only a plasma sun can accomplish that. Through the plasma sun, we begin to understand the universe. The sunlight is our proof that the sun is a plasma star. As you have recognized, the proof lies in the rich spectrum of the sunlight that is a composite of the emission spectra of all the different types of atoms that are born in the reaction cells. Only a plasma sun is able to produce the sunlight that we see. If our sun was a sphere of hydrogen gas, its light spectrum would be extremely meager. Why be so timid? Mary might interject. Say it as it is. If one removes plasma physics from the palette of cosmic considerations, one banishes 99.999% of the universe from the mind. Of course, what happens thereafter doesn't make sense. If science banishes the plasma sun, it banishes with it the solar wind and the solar cosmic ray flux, both of which are plasma that a hydrogen sun cannot generate. And by banishing that, science banishes the Earth's historic climate that has been hugely responsive to changing solar cosmic ray flux. That's an elementary thing, isn't it? It's been measured, plotted, and verified in different ways. You are getting close, Mary. The master of science might say, this is more than critical, what you are referring to. It is existentially critical that the plasma model for the sun be recognized and be acknowledged, because our sun's activity is rapidly diminishing, and with it our climate holiday on Earth is drawing to a close. This is what I call elementary. The climate began to diminish roughly 3,000 years ago. We have recently discovered that the diminishing climate does accord well with the diminishing rate of solar activity. This means that the sun is our climate master. We have also seen that the solar activity was ramped back up after the Little Ice Age in the 1600s, which gave us 250 to 300 years of solar-caused global warming. After that, we have seen the beginning of a near free-fall collapse in solar activity happening at the amazing rate of 30% in 10 years. That's the fast diminishing of the sun that we have measured with the Ulysses satellite in the polar orbit around the sun in the form of diminishing solar wind pressure. If one projects the rate of diminishment forward, the sunspots will end in the 2020s. The solar wind will stop in the 2030s. The solar surface temperature will diminish after that until the 2050s, when the electromagnetic fields collapse that focus plasma onto the sun. With the resulting phase shift, the solar temperature reverts back to its Ice Age default level, a 70% reduction, with which the interglacial holiday ends and the Earth becomes rapidly uninhabitable. This scenario is not a fairy tale. It is happening. The process has already begun. The rate of collapse is real. The first phase of it is already half complete. What I'm telling you is critical, Mary, because if humanity fails to recognize the truth about its solar system and thereby fails to respond to what is already unfolding, it will commit universal suicide by default because it then fails to build itself a new world with technological infrastructures that will enable its living to continue on the otherwise uninhabitable planet Earth. This is why the numerous fairy tales about a universe without plasma are immensely dangerous. They hide the true nature of the sun and the solar system behind it under a veil of deception that is imposed on it or is invited. To an alert person, the imagined magic dance of the black holes spiraling into each other, which defies all known principles, unfolds as nothing more complex than two major plasma streams merging. Large effects can result from that. Replace the black holes with plasma streams, and the effects will be as has been detected. No magic is needed. Plasma streams are real, and they do rotate fast, and they do join very quickly, because plasma streams are electric in nature and respond to electric forces. There are 39 orders of magnitude stronger than the force of gravity. To a human being, the truth is knowable, and knowing the truth is liberating. To an alert person, the imagined magic dance of the black holes spiraling into each other, which defies all known principles, unfolds as nothing more complex than two major plasma streams merging. Large effects can result from that. Replace the black holes with plasma streams, and the effects will be as has been detected. No magic is needed. Plasma streams are real, and they do rotate fast, and they do join very quickly, because plasma streams are electric in nature and respond to electric forces. There are 39 orders of magnitude stronger than the force of gravity. To a human being, the truth is knowable, and knowing the truth is liberating. Inversely, in the modern landscape of multiples of trapped people, knowing the truth is lacking. Society needs to be roused to the truth. The lack of truth has become existentially critical because a society of dreamers will not rise and build itself a new world to assure its future existence. which it sees no need for in the landscape of dreaming. A scientifically immovable society is committing suicide by default without being aware of it. The whole of humanity is presently stuck in this trap because too few in society are alert enough to cause a general movement away from the trap. The world is waiting for things to fall into place by itself. That's deadly. If the trap is deception, or invited self-deception, the liberating element is the truth. This means that the liberating element is science, a force that is focused on the truth. Isn't that the reason why the flat earth mythology is faded out of existence? When a concept is self-evidently false, one simply moves on and lets the false rise up and die like a stranded jellyfish. Science mythologies are like fish out of water. When physicists don't believe in physics anymore, the human response should be to help them to get back into the water. The truth is a scientist's native domain. It is its water. There is no peace in the landscape of the impossible. There is joy in recognizing what is actually real and in seeing it reflected everywhere in the universe. There is power in moving with the truth. This is the solution that science offers to physicists who don't believe in physics anymore, who lost their peace and joy and power. You should help them, Mary, to have peace, joy, and power again, and you will help them when you find real peace, joy, and power in yourself. The archaic flat earth concept has faded out of existence with the dawn of classical culture. Classical culture develops scientific perception. The Greek mathematician, geographer, poet, astronomer, and music theorist Aristotle, who has served as chief librarian of the Library of Alexandria, had not only calculated the circumference of the earth as a sphere, and this without stepping outside of Egypt for it. He had achieved the feat with an amazing accuracy by seeing in the mind the operation of fundamental principles. That's the power of science. The archaic flat earth perception was dead from this point on. When the flat earth concept was revived later in time as a mythology for various objectives, it often succeeded for religious and political objectives to deprogram segments of society away from demonstrated scientific perceptions, back to the mythological perceptions, especially during the counterculture wars against the Golden Renaissance. The insertion of contradictory postulates into the scientific awakening in society has a devolutionary effect. This effect is typically exploited to protect imperial religious structures against an awakening society by dragging society down into perceptual impotence. This trick to insert contradictory postulates into the scientific awakening in society is still being deployed to the present day for its disabling effects. The man-made global warming doctrine is an example of this type of the intentional deprogramming of society away from reality by means of inserting contradictory postulates into scientific perceptions. This modern type of flat Earth doctrine, named man-made global warming, was unleashed in 1975 to destroy the industrial power of society by vilifying it and vilifying humanity with it as elements of evil. The political objective, now imposed from the highest level, still continues. The man-made global warming doctrine had, and still has, an enormously damaging effect on society. Humanity is destroying its economics with it, even while the global warming postulate is physically impossible, and therefore is obviously not happening. Society is destroying its economics for its belief in a myth, while the actual physical cause for the global warming that had been experienced from the 1700s to the 1970s, the solar cause that we have physical measurements for. It is being swept under the rug because physicists don't believe in physics anymore. Belief in physics has given way to belief in politics. All physical factors are being ignored. The solar upramping that gave us 250 to 300 years of global warming is being ignored as if it didn't exist. Likewise is the physical nature of the CO2 greenhouse effect swept under the rug, as belief in physics has been supplanted with belief in politics. The CO2 absorption coefficient is up to 50 times less than that of water vapor, while water vapor is 100 times more dense in the atmosphere. In addition, CO2 is effective in only a few narrow bands in the low-energy part of the spectrum, while water vapor is effective in a wide band. In addition, the thermal absorption of oxygen and the Rayleigh scattering effect, which are both effective at the high energy end of the spectrum, add significantly to the greenhouse around the Earth. These are all hard physical factors that have been measured. They are all well understood, but they are ignored as almost no one believes in physics anymore. In addition to all that, the water vapor effect, that is king of the greenhouse system, is enormously affected by the cloud nucleation, which varies enormously with solar cosmic ray flux, which in turn varies with solar activity. This immensely variable physical factor, of course, is not even being considered in a world that doesn't believe in physics, although this factor too has been physically measured and is well understood. A huge experiment was conducted in Europe at a CERN lab to measure the effect of cosmic ray flux on cloud nucleation. A large test chamber of water vapor had artificial cosmic rays injected. The measured increase went off the chart when the cosmic rays were turned on. The experiment proves in principle that cosmic ray flux, which varies with solar dynamics, enormously affects cloudiness and thereby affects the climate on Earth in a big way. Increased cloudiness reflects a large portion of the solar radiation on the Earth back into space, with the climate getting colder thereby. CO2 has no effect in this at all. These are all well understood, enormously powerful, plain and simple physical climate factors. But in a world where physicists don't believe in physics anymore, these giant factors too are simply swept under the rug, with the song of politics setting the tune where no one believes in such archaic stuff as physics anymore. On the wide horizon of physical climate factors, the CO2 component is so minuscule that it is comparable to a cat in comparison with the height of the World Trade Towers. Even if a cat could be miraculously supernourished to grow as big as a horse, it still would remain insignificant for all practical purposes on this giant scene that is ruled by the sun and by what affects the sun in the form of changing plasma density around the sun. The injection of the myth that plasma physics plays no role in cosmology removes a critical dimension of reality that actually comprises 99.999% of the mass of the universe. This deep denial that has infected science, that robbed it of an entire physical dimension that is critical for understanding the universe, has a similar confusing effect as the flat earth dogma had in ancient times. Except in modern time, the debilitating effect is instigated by deception. Or is it the result of invited self-deception, Mary might interject. The blinded victims in the world of physics seem to say that they don't believe in plasma physics because plasma physics appears to them too remote and esoteric to be considered as serious science. Physicists who don't believe in physics have imprisoned themselves into a box of fantasies that is so empty of anything real that the universe can only be understood as being purely mechanistic in nature, even while the resulting imagery is not physically possible. It is this dreaming of something magical that doesn't exist that has become the esoteric factor in science, because there is no truth in any of it. The physicists have trapped themselves into this box and cannot get out of it. You give them too much credit, Mary, Jesus the scientist might reply. They didn't reject plasma physics. The entire subject was censored out of existence. Serious scientists wouldn't have rejected it if they were aware of it. Science has been circumcised. It has been mutilated. Plasma physics has been cut away and thrown into the trash can, just as billions of male babies had the foreskin of their penis cut off and thrown into the trash. The mutilated society is now wallowing in problems on a vast front. The consequences are bigger than post-traumatic stress disorder. Some who chose it and could experience the difference say it's like living in a world without color. Science is affected in a similar manner by removing plasma physics from cosmology, removing an entire category of color. In civilization, close sexual intimacy promotes social, civil, and national intimacy. When this is cut away at the root, a hollow, less loving, hard, warlike, even fascist society develops, with suicidal tendencies. It appears that the Egyptian Empire went a long way on this path. It destroyed itself with it at its very root. It now appears that in modern time, in the period after World War II, just as the epoch of empires had nearly ended, the process of the circumcision was ramped up by the masters of empire and applied to science in a big way and to the population of the USA in a big way. Prior to World War II, the sexual mutilation was extremely rare in America. Now, the non-mutilated men are rare. The effects are staggering. At the end of World War II, the USA was the richest, most prosperous, most industrialized, most developed, most admired, and most generous nation on the planet. Now it is the opposite on the entire front, including in science. The color is gone out in America. It is possible to get out of this trap, but who wants to? This trap forms the environment in which physicists don't believe in physics anymore. Just look at how the train of horrors has developed, Mary. In 1950, it was openly announced that the world has too many people and that something more dramatic has to be done than staging wars, because, as it was said, wars don't kill enough people. A huge offensive was launched to prevent the economic development of the third world nations. Poverty is a more potent killer than war. Here Kennedy intervened with the moon landing project that liberated economics in a big way, and to some degree also science. The resulting cultural optimism was so great that Kennedy was killed. The Vietnam War was subsequently ramped up, and with it, the demoralization of society was put into high gear. When the peace movement and numerous other factors brought the war to an end in 1973, a new avenue had to be found to continue and escalate the murdering of humanity. This resulted in 3 projects. In 1974, America's NSSM 200 doctrine expanded the economic war against the Third World nations. In the same time frame, AIDS was unleashed and spread across the world, primarily in Africa. And in 1975, the man-made global warming doctrine was invented. The mutilation of science had become so successful by this time that the devastating global warming doctrine could be launched. Its focus is to diminish the physical infrastructures that are needed by a living society, such as energy utilization, industrialization, housing construction, farming, all the way to the point of the mass burning of food by means of the biofuels hoax. The biofuels production presently consumes agricultural resources at a volume that would normally nourish 400 million people. In a world that has 1 billion people living in chronic starvation, the food burning adds up to a holocaust of silent dying in the range of 100 million people per year. So who believes in humanity anymore? In universal love and in the principle of the general welfare? And the saddest part is, Mary, that the entire Western society is actively participating in this crime against humanity and against itself. That's the result of a mutilated society that has lost its intimate connection with one another. This deeply rooted danger had been already noted in ancient times. The allegory of the biblical Jacob illustrates the debilitated nature of a mutilated society. It is a story of deceptions, marriage rivalry, and conflicts all the way through. We are told in the story that Jacob has 11 sons and 1 daughter in a marriage with 2 wives and with their servants. It is a long story that ends in tragedy. The root of the tragedy is not revealed until the end of the story. We are told there that Jacob's daughter fell in love with a man of an unmutilated village. Her brothers wouldn't allow their union to proceed, except under the condition that the men in the village would become as mutilated as they themselves were. We are told that this offer was a deception, because when the men in the village complied and were in pain by the circumcision procedure, the brothers came with their swords and killed all the men, sacked the village, and probably took the women as slaves. The writer raised a point that had evidently had tragic effects already in ancient times. This sad historic allegory still plays itself out in essence in the modern world, in which roughly 1 billion men live as mutilated victims and 100 million women. The statistics don't tell the full story, though. In the Middle East, 3 circumcised cultures are at war with each other. And on the scene of nuclear war, the East-West dividing line is between the USA, a nearly fully mutilated nation, and Russia and China, whose populations have so far remained intact. Like in the Jacob allegory, the circumcised camp, America, has the means developed to clobber Russia and China to death. This failed in the early stage when Russia had built a bigger bomb and saved the world from a nuclear war. We have the same contrast also causing tensions between North Korea, with a normal population, and South Korea, with a circumcised population. North Korea has been nearly clobbered into oblivion during the Korean War and remains still threatened and struggles to defend itself. It will take a lot of humanist, spiritual and cultural development to heal humanity of its debilitation, which also includes the debilitation of its science. The Ice Age challenge might be big enough to cause humanity to raise itself to a higher level stage. And it is critical that humanity begins the healing of itself soon, because the Ice Age challenge is already near on the horizon. The process has already started. The critical healing includes the healing of science. Fortunately, the healing of science is the easiest part. The healing of the numerous paradoxes in astrophysical science is relatively easy, regardless of their complexity, because a human being wants to be honest with itself about what is true. It is one thing to dream of black holes in space that no one can see, but when it comes to the hydrogen sun theory that renders the sun as heated from the inside, the honest in society are confronted with the paradox of the dark sunspots that everyone can see, but which shouldn't exist when the sun is energized from within. Some close their eyes and dream of dark energy as a magical exception. But with this they insult humanity, even their own humanity, by suggesting that such an impossible postulate should be considered as the truth. When they look at the sun, they cannot deny that the sun below the surface is dark, instead of being bright as it should be if it was heated from the inside. While they obediently bridge the paradox with dreams of magic, they cannot escape the recognition that they lie to themselves. They may not be comfortable with this, since at any moment a child may step forward, as in Christian Andersen's tale of the Emperor's New Clothes, and proclaim that black is black and never white. If the physicists would understand plasma physics, no such lies to themselves and to humanity would be needed. The pioneers of science might reply, black is black. The child would be right. The voice of a child may yet cause society to awake, as in Andersen's tale. To those living in the real world, plasma physics isn't esoteric at all, but to imagine that black is white would be seen as an esoteric dream. Plasma physics is such common sense type stuff that it is actually difficult to ignore, because its effects are everywhere. Plasma has an electric quality, its motion produces physical electric effects, such as magnetic phenomena. All magnetic phenomena in the universe are generated exclusively by the movement of electrically charged particles. The sun is alive with them. What can be simpler than to recognize the sun as a sphere of plasma with energetic reactions occurring on its surface? That's what it means to be living at the leading edge. The universe comes together as something that makes sense. If this simple reality was acknowledged, it would be acknowledged that the sun can't be anything but dark inside when all the actions are happening on the surface. Why shouldn't a physicist be able to understand this simple aspect of physics? If we were a normal, non-mutilated society, this paradox wouldn't even exist, and the Ice Age challenge would be a non-issue. In this case, the building of an Ice Age infrastructure would have already begun. That's how big this issue is that we need to heal. It has become an existential critical issue. Nevertheless, it also appears that some form of healing has already begun. Why then are those damaging lies still spun around those plainly apparent real happenings? They are spun because the truth is blocked with illusions. The truth is deemed not to exist. The science of astrophysics is boxed into a trap where all phenomena must be reduced to mechanistic effects. This is hard to do because one invariably ends up in dreaming about processes that are not physically possible, like the sun being powered by hydrogen nuclear fusion. The prevailing theory is the best that can be achieved on a mechanistic basis. But it doesn't work. It creates paradoxes. For example, it has been demonstrated that the mass of a helium nuclei is less than 4 times the mass of the protons that have formed it. What happens to the lost mass? Did the lost mass become transformed into energy? Is this how the sun is powered? This is the accepted model for solar hydrogen nuclear fusion power production. But is the assumption correct that such a process generates energy? Einstein says that mass is energy. When mass is lost, energy must be emitted. The hydrogen fusion sun theory is built on that. But how is the mass lost? Experience has shown that the nuclear fusion process is an energy-consuming process. Before 2 protons or nuclei can be forced to fuse together, they need to come extremely close. For this to be possible, a lot of energy is required to overcome their mutually repelling electric force that keeps the protons apart in the manner of a powerful inhibiting barrier. In order to force the 2 protons to collide, the enormously strong electric repulsion force must be overcome, termed the Coulomb barrier. The energy that is invested to break this barrier doesn't simply dissipate when the fusion takes place, but becomes a part of the resulting package. It becomes the binding energy for the package. a significant energy loss results from this. When diffusion takes place, internally another type of energy transfer is required that transmutes one of the up quarks in the package into a down quark. The transmuting process balances the internal electric structure, whereby an electrically neutral structure results, termed the neutron. Since each proton and a neutron also contains a mass field, an energy field that creates the effect of mass, the transmuting energy is likely drawn from this source. It reduces the apparent mass of the package. No energy is emitted for this to happen. The energy is transferred within. Nothing else makes sense, doesn't it? The bottom line is that atomic fusion is inherently an energy-consuming process, not an energy-producing process. This is why fusion power systems don't work. Fusion reactors require 10 times more energy input to achieve fusion than the fusion gives back. And the energy that is derived does not result from the fusion itself, but results from the unbinding of a neutron that is supplied in the fuel. That's the process utilized in the hydrogen atomic bomb. In the bomb, two overbuilt nuclei are forced together. One has a single neutron attached and the other two neutrons. In the process of combining the two into a helium nucleus, one of the neutrons becomes redundant and becomes unbound from the package with the release of the binding energy that had been previously invested into it. No actual energy production results. The neutrons that generate power in the nuclear bomb explosion and also in fusion power reactors were not produced in the bomb or the reactor, but were essentially supplied in the fuel. The reason why the energy burst of the hydrogen bomb is so immense is that a fission nuclear bomb within the bomb causes all excess neutrons in the fuel to become unbound simultaneously. Nor does the fuel exist naturally that contains the excess neutrons. This fuel needs to be manufactured. These facts don't prove the hydrogen sun theory. They prove the opposite. They illustrate that it is physically impossible for a hydrogen fusion sun to produce energy, even if a gas sphere of the size of the sun could actually exist. This paradox, of course, is easily resolved when plasma physics is considered, and the sun a plasma star. Here the solar energy is derived from the acceleration and concentration of interstellar plasma and its interaction with the sun's electron-rich photosphere. In the interaction, all natural atomic elements are synthesized in high-powered plasma fusion. From the synthesized atoms, the sun's light and heat is emitted. The process is simple and dynamic. No magic is required for it. The Big Bang theory is not required either. That is deemed to be the imagined source for the hydrogen gas atoms that the sun is supposed to be made of. The only requirement is that the universe is recognized to be vastly larger, more powerful, and more dynamic than the mechanistic theories allowed it to be. On this wider horizon of plasma physics, the universe is not paradoxical and enigmatical, what is simple and beautiful and a joy to behold and to understand. The tragedy begins when physicists and society with them defend their belief in what is not physically possible. They force themselves to live in a house that has its windows boarded up. The debilitated in science cannot see beyond their prescribed illusions, Mary. They are kept unaware in their boarded-up dwelling that they, by them defending their illusions, actually argue for the destruction of humanity and they themselves with it, and also their children, because their argumentation for something that doesn't exist opposes what really does exist. In this manner, the blinded people contribute to the tragedy that prevents the infrastructures from being built that are necessary to enable human living to continue in an Ice Age world. The trapped people cannot move and build the real world because they cannot recognize what it is. The theory of the hydrogen gas sun renders the sun an invariable factor for all climate considerations. This is the universal perception, which is a deadly trap. This prescribed perception, which has become mainstream science, stands as a powerful inhibiting barrier against the recognition of the real sun, that is enormously variable. The result of the blocking of this fact is so deadly that the danger cannot be focused on often enough. The real sun is not only inherently variable, it is also the master of our climate. It creates the ice ages, with the next ice age being as near as 30 years from now. Humanity is in mortal danger as a result of the scientific facts about it not being recognized, acknowledged, and responded to with corresponding actions. It has become existentially foolish to deny the universe. The bottom line is that our sun is a variable star because, as a plasma sun, it cannot be anything else. It is powered by plasma flowing into it from interstellar space that is subject to electric resonance phenomena and density variations, which depends on interstellar conditions. The composite of these drives our climate and determines our future. That's what the world should be alert of. I agree. The very opposite of senseless dreaming should be happening. Science should be sensitive to the truth, and society should be sensitive to what the truth is, namely that an ice age will begin because that is what the evidence and the science of it should promote the building of the needed infrastructures for living in an ice age world. This should happen even if there was only the slightest chance that an ice age will actually materialize. Humanity should move on the most minute hint and take the critical actions that are needed, because to fail would mean the end of much of humanity. However, the present evidence indicates that an extremely high probability exists that the next ice age startup will occur in the 2050s time frame or sooner. Humanity is committing suicide by not reacting to this high potential, believing in dreams of the impossible instead, including the dream that the interglacial holiday will last forever, so that society won't have to stir its stumps to respond to the Ice Age challenge. Inversely, If humanity was to react to this high potential that the Ice Age is near, humanity would be acting with power and build itself up in the process into the greatest renaissance of all times. Unfortunately, today's scene is a scene of impotence, Mary might comment. The giant that humanity has the potential to be is asleep, dreaming dreams of freedoms that are slavery, such as cultural freedom, scientific freedom, which adds up to freedom from reality, freedom from culture, freedom from science, freedom from reality. This defines your opportunity for getting out of the trap, the master scientist would say. Wake everybody up. Wake up. Don't let them sleep. Don't give them this freedom. When the perception is recognized for what it is, that has trapped much of the world, society becomes able to step away from that deception, from the false freedoms. Deceptions are temporary in nature, even when they are widely accepted. Deceptions don't defeat science, nor are they intended to defeat science, as this is not possible. Deceptions are intended to defeat society, and they do have that effect. However, the deceptions rule only until honesty in science obsoletes them. Until this day, their destructive effects continue. So wake people up, Mary. Give them a chance to live. There is nothing real in the dreaming imposed by deceptions. Life unfolds in the real world. The universe operates by principles that do not change with perceptions. Yes, we can step away from the false, but how to do it? How to open the eyes and the mind of the world? Mary might say, this hasn't happened yet. This hasn't been achieved. The nuclear war mythology still rules. The man-made global warming mythology still rules. The mechanistic universe mythology still rules likewise. The endless interglacial climate mythology also still rules. Even the Flat Earth Society mythology still rules to some degree. Have we made no progress? You can start making progress by recognizing yourself as a human being, while society remains choked under the hold of deceptions. We, at the leading edge, have made tremendous progress. The pioneer of science might say, we have made progress that has the power to change the world. We have become a light that is destined to flood the dark places with joy. That's how we will defeat deceptions. We have developed physically measured evidence that our sun is a plasma star. That's a big step forward. We discovered with that a sun is not its own master. That's immensely significant. It now enables us to align ourselves with the universe. We have measured evidence that the intensity of our sun's activity is rapidly diminishing, that the diminishing is caused by interstellar factors, that the sun is in a three-phase transition to the start of the next ice age. This knowledge is the end product gained by teams of scientists, engineers, contractors, workers and planners, both at NASA and the European Space Agency. It took 36 years to design the Ulysses mission, build the hardware, launch the spacecraft, and fly the mission to its final end. The mission was designed in the 1970s and was launched in space in 1990 on the first flight of the US space shuttle Discovery. It was a mission for discovery indeed. The spacecraft enabled us to see in space, in real time, that the activity of our sun is diminishing amazingly fast, at a rate of 30% in 10 years. It gave us a 40-year head start to prepare our world for what is to come, and thereby to live. And the discovered voids over the poles link the sun with the theoretical and experimental models for understanding the dynamics of the plasma sun as an interstellar-powered star. The spacecraft flew for 16 years. It enabled us to recognize that we are presently halfway through the first phase towards the Ice Age phase shift in the 2050s. We know that after the phase shift, the Earth will become uninhabitable, except in a very few places. We have gained this knowledge by the work of ice drilling teams on the Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets. The North Greenland Ice Coring Project was a 7-year effort that drilled 3,085 meters into the ice. The work gave us a detailed climate record going back in time 120,000 years. The Greenland Ice Coring Project enabled us to see, for the first time in measured details, the enormous climate fluctuations that an ice age phase shift brings with it, that pale anything historically experienced, which renders the entire world uninhabitable as we know it today, unless we build us technological infrastructures for living in an ice age world. A little of this knowledge existed 20 years ago, before the big science projects were conducted, both in space and on the ground. What we have accomplished on this front is gigantic, Mary. It is revolutionary. It dwarfs all the mythologies that stand against us into nothing in comparison. It enables us to pass them all by and move on. The power that invariably unfolds from the process of responding to the Ice Age imperative promises to start the greatest ever industrial revolution, cultural renaissance, revolutionary agricultures, revolutionary economics, a revolution in housing production, transportation systems, energy systems, and social advances yet unimaginable. In this revolution, which is a revolution against small-minded thinking, we will build us 6,000 new cities with free housing for all, constructed in automated industrial facilities, powered with large-scale nuclear energy systems, and potentially with cosmic energy from the plasma streams that power the sun. As a result of the created abundance, economics promises to become money-free. Money becomes an absolute factor. War, empire, property, terror, looting, and deceptions all will become obsolete factors. We have 30 years left to build us this revolutionary new world. And we will do this by all working together, because, Anything less won't be enough. In order to get this done, every facet of the building process needs to be revolutionized. And this will happen, Mary, because the alternative is unthinkable. And so it will happen. We will move with such power that the dreamers will awaken. We are not at war with the dreamers. We have no intention to take their dreams away. We may take their night away. We may roll the stone aside from the portal of deception, for the freedom of the human being to become known throughout the world. And we won't be alone in doing this, Mary, in building those 6,000 new cities with free living for the future of humanity. The whole world will be on board. This will become the most exciting episode in the entire history of humanity. Or we do nothing and watch us all starve to death in what then becomes the saddest episode in all history, Mary might add. Shouldn't we have already begun the building then? Instead, we inhabit the easy chair and do nothing. Or worse, we deny that anything needs to be done. We should have woken us up with the Big Bang, she might add. Isn't that where much of the dreaming began? The Big Bang is built on evidence that is not physically possible. The Redshift theory that supports the Big Bang dream of a universe expanding away from us in all directions is so evidently false that this particular dreaming should have ended right at the beginning. But we allowed the dreaming to continue. In dreaming, nothing is real. What we have accomplished is real. Jesus, the scientist, might answer. What we have accomplished is revolutionary. The Redshift died along the way, and with it died the Big Bang. It should be obvious to anyone in the science community that the redshift that the Big Bang is built on isn't what it is deemed to be. It isn't the result of light being stretched out by a source that is speeding away from us, like sound waves are stretched out that way. Quantum physics tells us that light is not an open wave like a sound wave in the air. The photons of light are recognized as closed wave structures, similar to packages that come in different sizes according to the different colors. When light is propagated over millions of light years, a slight energy dissipation invariably occurs, by which the packages become larger in size, because when less energy remains in the package to keep it together tightly, the package becomes larger. The result is that a violet package becomes a blue package, and the blue package becomes a green package, and the green a yellow one, and the yellow a brown, and the brown a red, and the red package becomes an infrared package that falls outside the visible spectrum. The whole spectrum thereby shifts to the right. This means that the redshift that astronomers have measured in light from distant galaxies is merely a proxy for distance, and for conditions in intergalactic space that cause energy dissipation. At the moment when this is understood, the Big Bang theory loses its foundation, and with it the dream vanishes. Until then, the Big Bang dream rules the imagination with fantastic visions of the impossible, and also of the extremely unlikely, such as the Earth being the center of the universe, with the universe racing away from us into all directions. The recessional redshift of 1 to 7% in increased wavelengths that has been observed would be the equivalent to a recessional speed between 3,000 and over 20,000 kilometers per second. The orbital speed of the Earth, in comparison, is a mere 30 kilometers per second. And for light from extremely distant galaxies, as has been observed with the Hubble Extreme Deep Field Telescope, the redshift is so great, in the order of 800 to 1200%, that the measured redshift translates itself into a recessional speed exceeding the speed of light multiple times. The Hubble Extreme Deep Field Telescope gives us the deepest look in the universe ever achieved. What it revealed essentially disproves the Big Bang theory that is stepping us from the improbable to the impossible on to the mind-boggling. The universe isn't mind-boggling. The mind-boggling theories are typically the result of cultural warfare against science, that science itself is on the path of freeing itself from. A human being can get out of the cultural warfare traps by simply recognizing the traps for what they are, and by recognizing what is actually real. This is what advanced science achieves by revealing the impossible aspects of the paradoxes of various traps. But can you be sure that the Big Bang is a trap? Mary might ask the master scientist. Isn't it remotely possible that a redshift of light really is the result of the source of light racing away from us, which thereby stretches out the waves of light? NASA recently conducted an experiment by looking at the sun that seems to prove on our own home ground the theory of stretched out light. The sun has a circumference of 4.4 million kilometers. It takes 23 days to complete a full rotation at its equator. This gives us a surface speed of 7,970 kilometers an hour, or 2.2 kilometers per second. That's the speed with which the light source on the sun rotates towards us on one side and away from us on the other, for a combined difference of 4.4 kilometers per second. NASA assumes that this difference in rotational movement should reflect itself as a redshift difference in the light coming from the two opposite sides of the sun observed for the spectral line for iron. We are told that when exact measurements were made by NASA, there was indeed a minuscule Doppler shift detected between the two sides of the sun. Doesn't this prove that light gets stretched out from a light source that is moving away from us for a redshift and is compressed within the source that moves towards us for a blue shift. Doesn't the experiment thereby prove the Big Bang theory? No, it doesn't prove the theory, Mary. It disproves it. It actually proves that the observed Doppler shift is caused by energy depletion. Look at it this way. The Sun is surrounded by a halo of densely concentrated plasma that rotates with the Sun. This means that the light from one side of the Sun, as seen from the Earth, flows in the same direction as the plasma is moving. And on the other side, the light flows against the movement of the plasma. This interaction of the light with moving plasma should reflect itself in a difference in energy dissipation within the photons, and should therefore cause a difference in redshift. Everyone who ever rode a bicycle knows that it takes far less effort to ride the bike with the wind than it takes to drive it against the wind. The same applies to light. This is evidently the difference that NASA has measured as redshift in the light coming from the two opposite sides of the Sun. It is doubtful that a rotational speed differential of 4.4 kilometers per second is physically measurable as redshift in fractions of the speed of light, which adds up to a 1.5% difference. While redshifts from 1% to 7% are typically measured values. To physically measure a 1.5% difference in patterns of light would be a miracle if it was practically possible. What NASA had measured had a different cause. NASA would have measured the difference in light energy loss between the light flowing with or against the movement of the dense plasma that surrounds the Sun. The resulting energy loss difference, when it is expressed in the size of photon packages, would likely be substantial enough to be actually measurable. The result thereby disproves the Big Bang theory instead of proving it. Does the comparison really prove that when light flows in discrete quantum packets, the Big Bang theory is a dream? Yes, it proves it. But it doesn't prove anything significant, Mary. It only tells us that one of the theories of the universe is true rather than the other. The recognition of the truth creates peace in the mind, as it doesn't play with physical impossibilities and magical fudge factors. That's what's important about it. A sense of peace results when the incomprehensible is now no longer required to be comprehended, such as to accept that our universe of 400 billion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of solar systems in them, and planets and all, have originated in a single-point explosion and is now expanding faster than the speed of light, which the Big Bang theory bids us to believe. This takes us far beyond even science fiction. Inversely, when one recognizes what is real, such as that light cannot be exempt from energy depletion, the universe comes to light as much more beautiful and accessible and understandable and logical. In the real world, the detected redshift is simply a proxy for distance. Of course, this means that the Earth is no longer the center of the universe, with the universe racing away from us, but is simply all around us. This logical view puts the mind at peace. However, apart from the lack of peace that is experienced in erroneous theories, it makes not the slightest practical difference to human living when false theories are believed. That's so because our world is not physically touched by what is not physically possible. This is an important principle for us to recognize. This principle was known already in distant history. In the historic Moses legend, a scene of conflict is set up to illustrate to Pharaoh that God or reality is supreme. Moses commands his assistant Aaron to cast his staff onto the ground before Pharaoh. As he does so, the staff becomes a serpent. Pharaoh, apparently unimpressed, commands his magicians to do so likewise. As they did so, each one's staff became a serpent too. As the story is told, Moses' serpent ate up all the other serpents. That's the fate of imagery or error. Truth simply eats them all up. Truth evidently has this type of effect on illusions. An error has no history because it never was true. Just let it go, Mary. The mechanistic theories of the universe fall by the wayside when it becomes recognized what is really going on. In comparison with these trivial concerns that are inconsequential, we are immensely affected by our recognizing the solar system's dynamics correctly and the Ice Age dynamics as demonstrable truths. And in this arena, nothing is esoteric and inconsequential. The sun masters our climate. That's not esoteric. It is measurable. We have concrete measurements available for that in carbon-14 ratios, beryllium-10 ratios, and in sunspot numbers. All of these measurements tell the same story, and this story points to immense and immediate consequences. In addition, we have hard measurements on hand that tell us that the solar system's dynamics are rapidly diminishing, almost as fast as a falling stone. This is not theory. We have multiple measurements for this likewise. And this is happening on our doorstep. Nor is it something that may happen in the distant future. It is happening now. The process is on. As I said before, we are already halfway through the first phase. We have multiple types of measurements on record that all tell us, each in its own way, that we are beyond theory on this front. We are past predicting things far in the future. The future is now. The process is on. The Ice Age process has begun. We can tell from the measurements of its progression that in roughly 30 years the Earth will become an uninhabitable planet, except for a few small areas. We know from the measurements that we have made that if we don't build us large-scale technological infrastructures that make it possible for us to live in an Ice Age environment, like building 6,000 new cities in the tropics, primarily along the equator, together with high-tech agriculture, the whole of humanity would be committing suicide by this default, with a few minute exceptions. In comparison with these immediate concerns with big consequences, all that esoteric stuff, from black holes to the expanding universe, is synonymous with straining out gnats while swallowing camels. The vast field of science dreaming of the physically impossible that has shifted the focus away from reality has become a worldwide tragedy. The world has presently trapped itself with this into the tragedy of being fascinated with what is not real and cannot be real, while it keeps its eyes closed to what is real and stands on its doorstep knocking. Rome is burning. Humanity is engaged in playing mind games while the house is burning down. That's where we are at. The consequences of this tragedy are so unimaginably enormous that I must repeat that if the impasse is not resolved, that keeps society trapped, that prevents society from creating itself the infrastructures for its future survival, which will be needed in 30 years when the next Ice Age phase shift happens. Humanity will die a collective death. Fortunately, this hard, cold, and heavy stone that humanity has created, that guards its doom, is beginning to move. The Big Bang and the neutron stars are fading into the dustbin like dying ghosts in fairy tales. Humanity's science is on the move, clearing the box of deceptions from the landscape, making room for light. If it wasn't for this light, the world would have no hope. Without this light, the dreamers would commit humanity to its death. This light is real. We are no longer dead at the leading edge, but are moving forward with joy and power, and we will have our peace. Do you really believe what you are saying? Mary might interrupt. Where is the evidence for it? If you would stand on the street corner and say what you just said, nobody would believe you. If you would solicit donations for your cars, you wouldn't collect a penny. If you would speak of the urgency, people would laugh at you and ask, "What are you smoking?" If you would say that their very existence is at stake, so that actions are required, they would give you the finger and say that God won't let this happen. God will take care of everything. God has already done his part, Mary. As a son of God, you are qualified to meet your need. Humanity is extremely qualified with its scientific mind. We understand the principles, the physics, the challenges, and the solutions. What more would we need? We have the technologies already developed to implement the solutions. What more would we want? We have all the resources that are required already in the pocket. We have the materials, we have the energy resources sitting idly on the ground, unused, in near infinite abundance. And we have the technologies to use them in the pocket. Could we ask for more? We have plenty of lead time to get the job done. No miracle is required to come in on time and on budget. The budget includes creating a renaissance along the way, ending poverty, hunger, war, terror, looting, exploitation, even dreaming. And it includes creating an efficient new economic system, potentially without money, since money has been historically a millstone that choked economics. A moneyless society has the potential to be the richest that ever lived. Why would anyone want to live in a debt-choked world instead of in a world of abundance? The Ice Age infrastructures cannot be built on a money-debt basis anyway. There isn't enough money in the world, and not enough time to get anything done on the platform of greed-based impotence. Consequently, we step away from it. We step into the future. That's the face of sanity in the world, the reflected face of God. What we have got in the pocket is better than miracles in the sky. We are the miracle makers, Mary. What more could we be? In fact, we got far more than just the materials, energy resources, and the technologies that we need to create the needed Ice Age infrastructures. We also have a new mind developing that matches the requirements. All the great cultural achievements were wrought during the cold climates on Earth. These are times when larger volumes of cosmic rays were emitted from the sun. The dawn of written languages occurred in one of these cosmic ray-rich times, as did the dawn of Christianity, the dawn of Islam, the Islamic Renaissance, and the Golden Renaissance, and so on. With the sun now fast diminishing, we are rapidly drifting back into the cosmic ray-rich times, where we find us with enhanced spiritual and mental capacities, the likes of which we haven't seen for a long time, if ever. The human body is typically subjected to 50,000 cosmic ray encounters per day. While the cosmic ray particles are so small that they flow right through us without colliding with anything, they do nevertheless cause an electric current to flow by electromagnetic induction. The electric currents, minute as they are, appear to enhance the human neurological system that operates electrically. The historic pattern suggests that the induced electric currents nourish the neurological system. This means that we can expect a large increase of this nourishment coming our way, which has already begun. The Ice Age challenge will likely be met with ease along this path. Inversely, the periods of the hot climates, which are cosmic ray lean times, have been periods of war and economic devastation. The same also holds true in the larger sweep of history, Mary. The great Giza pyramids stand as a testament for that. Are you sure the pyramids were built by humanity? Mary might interject. People suggest that they were built by spacefaring visitors. The complexity of their design and the precision of their construction is of a different class that stands way above what the Egyptians had been capable of. The sides of the pyramids are more closely aligned to the Earth's meridian than the prime meridian established in Greenwich in London in the mid-1800s. The Egyptians didn't even know at that time that the Earth is a sphere when the pyramids were supposedly built. Much less did they know that the Earth is rotating on a spin axis. How then could they be able to align a mega monument of the size of the pyramids to the invisible meridian with a 3-minute of an arc accuracy that probably remains unsurpassed to the present day? The Egyptians couldn't have built these monuments. In addition to that, human beings are far too feeble to have constructed these giant monuments, cutting 20-ton granite blocks with razor-sharp precision and hoist them up a 58-degree slope, several hundred feet high, without electric cranes and transport machinery. Yet the pyramids do exist. Many people now say that only extraterrestrials could have accomplished that amazing feat of building the gigantic wonders at Giza. I tend to agree. Are you saying that you have joined the club of those who don't believe in physics anymore? The master of science might answer. Give me a team of 200 men and I'll hoist a 20-ton block onto the top of the Great Pyramid without any problem. Even you can do that. Set up a pulley on top, swing a rope over it, place the stone on a sled, tie the rope to it. Place your team on top of the pyramid with hooks in the rope. Tell them to lean their body weight into the rope. Their combined weight will outweigh the stone. They will simply walk the stone up as they walk down. And why shouldn't they have known that the Earth is a sphere and how the meridian is oriented? That's not a big feat for a human being, especially in the cosmic ray-rich time of the Ice Age environment. With less moisture in the air, the sky was clearer. The people could have been expert astronomers and scientists in spherical geometry. And so, as for the meridian, the orientation would have been pointed out to them by plasma flow dynamics. Parts of the solar primofield structure that feeds plasma onto the sun would likely have been visible during the time when the sun was ramped up in a big way at the start of the interglacial period. It would appear above and below the sun and aligned perfectly perpendicular to the ecliptic. when it was seen that way from the Earth, the orientation of the meridian would have been indicated all the way to touching the horizon. From this reference point, it would have been easy to draw a line accurately across the land. This means that the pyramids of Giza are likely another proof that the Sun is a plasma star. This also means that they couldn't have been built at the time of the pharaohs, but were built at the start of the interglacial period instead, roughly 12,500 years ago. The orientation of the Sphinx confirms this. It is oriented precisely in the direction where the constellation Leo, its image, would have appeared 12,500 years ago, at the dawn of the spring equinox. The pyramids themselves appear to have been built slightly later, at around 12,000 years ago, when the relative position of the stars of Orion would have matched precisely the relative positions of the pyramids. This date would also match the start-up time of the interglacial period, in which we would have seen strong plasma focus events. Also, the building of the pyramids might have been easy at this time. The Earth had been bombarded with much larger volumes of high-energy cosmic ray flux, possibly hundreds of times larger than today. With this massive energetic bombardment of protons going on for tens of thousands of years, the surface rocks would likely have been saturated with protons, so that their repelling force within the crystalline structures of the rocks would have rendered the rocks significantly softer, easy to cut and carve, and easier to transport, aided by the repelling force. No big machinery would have been required to manufacture the millions of stone blocks to build the pyramids with. The civilization of the builders appears to have vanished more than 8,000 years ago, when the Sahara became overlaid with sands from swarms of asteroids intrusions into the atmosphere, potentially, by which the Sahara became a desert. The Sahara used to be lush and green prior to the sands. The remnant of the people of the builders may have migrated to the Indus River Valley and established a new civilization there. We find the earliest civilization with a written language there and with irrigated agriculture. The reason why the pyramids could not have been built by the pharaohs 4,500 years ago is that humanity had been cognitively regressing during the cosmically lean interglacial period. Also, if the pharaohs had built the pyramids, the walls within them would not have been left bare without a single inscription. Now that the solar system is in a free-fall weakening towards the cosmically rich times of the next ice age, we are seeing the fringe effects already happening. The wars are getting smaller and are fast drawing to a close, while technological progress is leaping forward evermore. This means that the age of empire is also drawing to a close. Empire and war is one. When empire ends, wars end. With the American empire already fading, we have seen for the first time in a long time an American president paying a state visit to China and joining hands with the president of China, and days later with the president of Russia. The insane isolation of humanity that marks our interglacial culture is beginning to fade and yield to cooperative development. If these are the present signs of progress, while we still have 30 years to go until the big phase shift happens to the real rich times, the amount of progress that lays before the whole world is almost unimaginable. Considering that we are only halfway through the first phase of the solar system's collapse to the next ice age, with so much room for further progress, both technologically and physically and scientifically and socially, it seems that we are still at the beginning stage on all fronts at the present. This means that the Ice Age challenge will be met, and we will not miss a beat in making our world the richest place it has ever been in the face of that challenge. It appears that the universe is aiding us on this path. How then could we fail? Someday soon we may awake to what we are and have the capability of creating. We do have the power to awake to this advanced stage. We are the sons of God, and God is not a dreamer. We cannot be what God is not. We still have time to recognize this universally and rouse us to embrace the greatest opportunity for a fuller humanity and a rich world beyond dreams that the Ice Age challenge begs us to accept, which we are fully qualified for. This means that we are in a race, not against time or destiny, but with ourselves. The race has just begun, in which we cannot fail, and for which we have the right stuff already in our pocket. Would you expect anything less from the sons of God, Mary? Christmas is the stage for celebrating the start of a new world. As we lay the role-playing aside, a phase shift in thinking begins. We are progressing, even amazingly fast in some cases. Still the question remains, have we done enough? On the Ice Age front, we have achieved miracles. We have developed answers with scientific discoveries for questions that we couldn't even ask only 20 years ago. Now we are building on the answers. We are not following history anymore. We are making history instead. The current inflection point in the history of humanity promises to be the greatest of all times, because the opportunity we have today and the power to use it is the greatest of all time. Never before in the entire history of life on Earth has the capability existed to bring a 7 billion world population into a largely uninhabitable world that the Earth is during every ice age. This with enough power for the people to flourish in this world with peace and joy, and to develop evermore in it with the power of our common humanity. A milestone achievement was NASA's Ulysses mission that discovered that the solar system is diminishing and measured its enormously fast rate of collapse at 30% over 10 years, both in terms of the fading solar wind pressure and in the fading underlying solar magnetic field. Measurements were completed in 2008 when the mission was terminated. The collapse in the solar activity projected forward suggests that a long-awaited ice age transition will happen in the 2050s time frame. It was known at the time, in 2008, that the Earth becomes a largely uninhabitable, largely ice-bound planet that few people are able to survive unless the infrastructures are built to make the coming ice world habitable. It became self-evident in this time that for humanity to survive, a new world will have to be created to enable the relocation of most of humanity into the tropics, away from the cold, and that this would have to be placed afloat on the equatorial seas. On the sea, humanity is safe from flooding, from earthquakes, from droughts, and also to a large degree from asteroid intrusions. It further became apparent as far back as 2008 that the task for building a new world in the tropics, afloat on the seas, is so great that all nations will have to carry the task together, cooperatively. So, almost as it was in response, a sequence of amazing movements began to happen at this time towards the forming of cooperative associations of nations for the building of infrastructures towards meeting the common aims of mankind. In the year 2009, a new, far-flung financial and economic alliance was forged, which became the BRICS alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that joined in 2010. This alliance brings together 41% of the world population, not as an empire, but for improved bilateral relations for the common benefit of the participating partners. 3 years after that, in the year 2013, the principle of the win-win cooperative union of nations was given still a wider form with the initiative by China that became known famously as the Belt and Road Initiative. The initiative is expected to bridge the wide infrastructure gap that exists across the Asia-Pacific area and Central Eastern Europe, all the way into Africa and beyond. And that, by bridging the gap, it accelerates economic growth in the affected areas. The grand design is to bring the world closer together on a win-win basis. While none of the projects are focused on the critical building of the Ice Age infrastructures, an extremely valuable basis for cooperative relationships is being established thereby as a starting platform towards the larger fulfillment of the Ice Age projects. Another aspect that is supercritical for the great Ice Age infrastructure development is peace in the world. On this front, Russia made enormous contributions towards ending the terrorist orgies in Syria by defending Syria militarily and by bringing a new sense of cultural peace into the terrorized world. A milestone on this path was the liberation of Palmyra in Syria from ISIS terror in 2016. The liberation was celebrated on May the 5th with a classical music performance by the St. Petersburg Mariinsky Theatre Orchestra, staged right in the middle of a former war zone. The event uplifted the humanist landscape. The event quietly changed the world. Half a year later, in September 2016, the cultural focus was uplifted once again when China hosted the G20 World Summit in 2016. The logo for the summit, surprisingly, was symbolic of plasma flow physics, such as streams of plasma flowing around a sun. The cultural element of the summit was performed on a lake, with the stage submerged just inches below the surface, so that the performers were literally dancing on water. Was this China's way of indicating that it is aware of the Ice Age challenge and the need for building a new world afloat on the sea? Then, shortly after the G20 summit, in November of that year, another major event happened that surprised the world. Donald Trump won the American presidential election. The American electorate broke ranks with the war and terror parties and elected for the first time in modern history a president who speaks about peace and building cooperative alliances between the USA and Russia and China, resulting in an uplift in international relations that only a year earlier seemed totally impossible even to hope for. In the year after the US election, on May 14, 2017, China hosted the Belt and Road Forum in Beijing, which over 100 countries were attending. It was said about the event that the spirit of economic development had become infectious. But more important than the economic scene seemed to have been the forum's gala performance. At the cultural performance, a ballet performance of the event featured another symbol that is symbolic of the Ice Age challenge. The symbol appears to symbolize the Earth as an ice planet, which cannot be evaded, but must be faced. The third major event in 2017 in China was China's hosting of the annual BRICS Summit. During the summit's gala event, another Ice Age-related symbol appeared prominently. A big yellow sun appeared in a dark sky in the background of a scene focused on children, as if China was saying to the world that the future belongs to the children and that this future will unfold under a darker Ice Age sun, meaning that the present world must be built up with Ice Age infrastructures primarily for today's children, for them to have a place to live and flourish and develop in the near Ice Age world. It is interesting to note in this context that President Xi Jinping and other key dignitaries were ushered into the performance hall and to their seats by the hands of children. Does this mean that China may recognize the need for creating a new world for the children of our time, for them to have a future in an ice planet world? That's probably too much to hope for. Nevertheless, it is interesting to note that the first scene of the BRICS 2017 gala performance was a ballet scene of an awakening staged against the background of the sea. The sea will be the dwelling of humanity in potentially the 2050s. It appears that an awakening to this reality among this line may have already begun, perhaps even in a significant way. Whether the awakening will also cause a fading away of the many science illusions that still prevail remains yet to be seen. In some respects, the progress has been amazing that has been made in the last 10 years since NASA's Ulysses mission had measured the rate of the ongoing collapse of the solar system. Nevertheless, the result has been too feeble to make a significant difference in the global scene, where humanity remains largely asleep. Humanity may yet murder its children by default, as nothing substantial is being done to enable its children to have a future in the near Ice Age world. Thus the question repeats itself: have we done enough? The greatest transformation of our planet has begun, while society dreams on, lulled with stupefying illusions, and its eyes closed to the greatest opportunity and the greatest challenge to raise itself up that remains yet to be realized.
勇敢逐浪，在海天之间，人脚下涛涌浪飞旋，为梦想启程，高扬起风帆，我们同船渡破浪向前，激流勇进，在潮头之巅，开新天无惧间重现，新世界的旅途美丽又遥远，我们共开创风光无限，扬帆未来，我们携手向前，迎接新日出，未来就在眼前。 心愿，愿时光停留着说。